What if I told you that you should already be a millionaire? Intrigued? Find out why in this episode of Seven Figure Sister. Today, I am speaking to my sisters out there for real, my sisters, right? Because I'm really focusing on Black women's work, Black women's wages, and the degree to which we are underpaid for the work that we do. Now, in case you don't know much about my background, let me fill you in on why I'm the best person to take this info from. So prior to becoming the media maven that I am, prior to becoming the badass business coach that I am, for many years I worked in the Washington, D.C. think tank sphere. And basically, that's a whole network of organizations that produce research, that run numbers, that write reports, that provide information to policymakers in order for them to use to help make strong arguments to pass laws that we believe will help people or to stop laws that we believe will hurt people. And I spent many years in that space, specifically focusing on the intersection of race, class, and the economy. And specifically, I was looking at the economic well being of Black women. That was specifically what I was specialized in throughout my years, nearly 20 years in that space. Throughout that time, one of the statistics that I looked at each and every year, analyzed, wrote about, spoke about, have written about in various different forms has been the wage gap. Now, what is the wage gap? Oftentimes we hear about this term, the wage gap, and usually it is just sort of a broad terminology that looks at the gap in wages between what the typical woman makes compared to what the typical man makes. But let me just sort of unveil the covers from you around that as one who used to run those numbers. Yes, they look at what women make by aggregating, putting together and developing an average of what all women make, putting in women of all races, typically when you're hearing that number. And they're comparing that to white men's wages specifically, because the reality is that there are wage gaps that are both race and gendered. So they will compare women's wages to white men's wages. And that's what people refer to when they talk about the wage gap. All right. Now, here's what I want you to know. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. And it's especially complicated for Black women in that our wage gap is literally raced and gendered. So, for example, we face a wage gap as compared to white men, but we also face a wage gap as compared to white women in that we make significantly less than both. What is this huge background and buildup for that I'm giving you right now? It's to put into context what is different about this wage gap right now. I just yesterday took a look at the numbers around the wage gap for 2022, because as I mentioned, this number, this figure, it changes every year. And what I found completely startled me. It completely angered me. It completely baffled me. What I saw was the biggest drop, the biggest sort of huge jump, or I guess downgrade, or I guess the increase. What I saw was the biggest change in wage gaps that I have seen for Black women in the entire 20 plus years that I've been analyzing these numbers. It was shocking. What I found was that as of 2022, the Black woman's wage gap stands at just 58 cents to every dollar that her white male counterpart makes. Yes, you heard me right. The typical Black woman makes only 58 cents to every dollar that her white male counterpart makes. And what's even more shocking to me is that this is a huge difference between what we saw in wage gaps just last year, where the typical Black woman made about 63 cents to the dollar of her white male counterpart. Now, to the layperson, this may not seem like that much difference, 63 cents to 58 cents. But let me just tell you, in statistical terms, this is a huge drop in that short of amount of time. It's huge. It's cataclysmic. That is a huge, statistically significant shift. But what's even more disturbing to me than the reality that we've experienced this huge drop, and that the reality that the typical Black woman only makes a little over half of what white men make, uh, shocking, 58 cents to the dollar. Then what's particularly disturbing to me is the direction in which this is going. It's going down. Instead of getting better, the wage gap is getting worse. So right now we're finding ourselves in a situation where Black women aren't working less than they have in the past. Our work effort has not decreased. Our work ethic has not decreased. Our brilliance has not decreased. The quality of what we do has not decreased, but our pay has decreased. To me, that is infuriating. And I have to say, that is at the heart of why I do what I do, because I firmly believe that, particularly as Black women, we will never be paid fairly for the work that we've done. Think about it. I've just told you about the wage gaps that we've experienced. There have been studies that's been done, even when the wage gaps were not as wide as it is right now. We were making a little bit closer to what white men were making. And those studies have found consistently that over the course of our working years as Black women, if we had been paid commensurate to what our white male counterparts were paid, we would be able at the end of our careers to be able to retire millionaires. We literally lose out over the course of our working years on roughly $1 million specifically due to the wage gap. And because of that, I say, sisters, you should already be a millionaire. If you were paid fairly, you would right now be on par to being a millionaire. This year's wage gap alone is so wide. It could have been used, if you were paid fairly, you could use that to pay for 2 years of the typical rent in America. That's how much money you're losing. You could use that to pay almost a year of healthcare premiums. You could use that. The bottom line is, we have never been paid fairly for the work that we have done. And it is my belief that we never will. So if you wonder why I am so passionate about entrepreneurship, it's because I truly believe that we will never be paid what we deserve to be paid until we gain the power to write our own checks, to really be the person that is in charge of our own destiny in terms of what we charge and what we receive. That right there is a power that we need, and we need to maximize it. So when I talk about becoming a seven-figure system, I talk about it from the standpoint of getting what you deserve, being paid at a level that is commensurate with your genius, being able to break free from the exploitation that we typically face in the work world. Now is the time to really be able to maximize our entrepreneurial spirit. The data is clear. Black women are the most likely demographic group in this nation to start a business. So we get it. We know we're not being paid fairly. And that, I believe, is the reason why we so are overrepresented in the entrepreneurial space. A Black woman today is more likely to start a business than her white male counterpart. But doesn't that make sense? If you can get paid up the wazoo just working for somebody else, so maybe that's one of the reasons why. I don't know. But ultimately, what I'm saying here is that because we understand that the odds are stacked against us, we've seen other people that we've trained get promoted over us. We see our wages stay stagnant as prices for everything goes up. Then what we need to know is, how can we then finally get paid what we deserve? And so to me, that's about not only starting your own business, it's about maximizing what you charge to access your brilliance. It's about understanding that you not only deserve to be paid, you deserve to be paid well for what you do. It's about really understanding your value and not being willing to settle for less. It's about going for that high, hard, seven-figure ceiling and breaking through that sucker. That is what this is about. And if you are ready for that journey, I am so excited to be able to work with you in this podcast to make it real. I want to welcome you to your new seven-figure reality. Get ready. It's going to be a fun ride. See you next time on Seven Figure Sister.